Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here. And we are looking forward to having your input in tonight's budget workshop. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Geo, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we have Chris Ruggia, Ward 3.
Okay, come on up, Chris. Please go ahead and re-announce your name and ward
My
for the
name
camera.
is Chris Ruggia. I live in Ward 3. I want to thank you for this moment. I want to just speak briefly on behalf of the library and city support of it. The city and county have both offered financial support to the library for a very long time. I do believe that library services are a governmental responsibility, but we're in a unique situation here in that the library is not a government department of either the city or the county, but an independent nonprofit, which gives us the luxury of being able to share that support between our two local governments. And so that spreads the weight a little bit. The current level of financial support from both entities is unchanged for perhaps, and Don Wetterauer, our library director, is here, and he can give you a lot more detailed information about the function of the library now. But I would say at least about 20 years has been unchanged. The county has gone down and then back up for different reasons over years. But at the time that those numbers were set, those two revenue sources comprised, I would say 85 to 90 or more % of the annual budget of the library. So when those were set, they were intended to be the support that ran the library. In the 20 years since then, a new building has been built along the way. Circulation has more than doubled. The number of library cards is 9,000, something like that. There's a lot. Program participation, from the last 20 years has grown considerably. While I know that city and county both have a lot of difficult funding decisions to make every single year, but I do want to put that before you, that we have a very effective library services program that's being basically subsidized by a lot of volunteer labor. And so well over half of the budget now is coming in from donations, fundraisers, things like that. And so the percentage that government support shows now is less than 50%, whereas 20 years ago, it was closer to 90. And so I want to just lay that idea in front of you. I'm afraid I have another conflict, so I have to go, but I just wanted to share that with you guys. And thank you for struggling with the difficult decisions you will always have to. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Okay, any other public comments?
Yeah.
Okay, so the way the workshop should run is we're going to have a PowerPoint from the city manager, and as you have comments or concerns or whatever, just raise your hand and I'll have you come up so that anybody on Zoom will have your name, what ward you're from, and what your question is. If you stay back there and ask your question, it's very hard for them to hear it. But we want this to be very interactive. We want your input. Okay. All right, city manager, it's all yours.
Give it a few seconds here. Okay, so today's budget workshop is on the expense side. It's going to be kind of an overview rundown. Every month you guys have been getting an actual detailed list of every line item. Some of them are inactive, some of them are active. You can see how the money moves. This is going to give you a bigger overview to kind of understand and some of the decisions that have already been made moving into this next fiscal year. So our main expense is our employees. Employees per department, you're looking at anywhere from 30 to 90% of the actual departmental costs. So employees are the most expensive asset that the city has. They are the main asset for all of our departments. And it's not just salaries and overtime. So when you think about an employee, we're not just budgeting salaries and overtime. We're also budgeting all the benefits. It's the insurance, medical, dental, vision, life, retirement, unemployment, workman's comp, vacation, sick leave, holidays, longevity, uniforms, vehicles, IT equipment. This is the basics for one employee. So when an employee, and we had that conversation and we start them off at $13.50, that's not the reality of it. By the time you add everything else into it, they're starting off at more between $22 and $25 an hour. It's just not money in their pocket, but it's an expense coming out of our budgets. Sorry, I gotta move my screen up here. So I wanted to give a breakdown of our employees. It's a little hard to compare year to year. We didn't budget one fiscal year on positions. We budgeted on a pot of money. And so if you had the money, you hired a person. So I wanted to go back and put more structure into it. And this is the hard conversation I had with directors as far as you want to look at each position. So you'll notice over the years, 81 is what we technically had on my spreadsheet budgeted for 2021, but that's not how many employees we actually paid. 21, 2022, 92.5, and then 22, 23, 91. So this goes down and looks at every different department. The big change with administration moving forward is a full-time records clerk. We had a lot of part-time positions. That's one thing I should explain. The 0.5s are part-times. So you may see 4 or 5 full-time employees, but it may actually be, 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. But we're looking at it just from a full-time perspective. And then transferring the grant writer from the finance to the administration so that we can continue to work together moving forward with all of the grants. So you'll see the decrease in the finance side and the increase in the admin side. The police department reduced by a half. Instead of having 2 part-time positions for dispatch, they went to 1. I talked to Daryl about that last night. For probably since 2018, we've budgeted for either a fire chief or an assistant to the fire chief or an administrative assistant. It's kind of changed through the years for the fire department. That's been completely removed. I don't foresee us filling that. We haven't fulfilled it for years. So it's been removed. Building services. This is a unique department. We went from 1 to 3 over the time span that I've been here. This upcoming year, we're budgeting 2.5. Adelina was gracious to accept an opportunity. So she's actually split between code enforcement and environmental services. We had actually had that once before with the prior environmental service coordinator. They both complement those positions. Your environmental services is your go-getter for illegal dumping and keeping Alpine beautiful and enforcing those code enforcements. So she's split between the 2 departments. Human resource. Initially, when this position was pulled out of finance, it was made a full-time position, and then it went to a half-time or part-time position. We really need a full-time HR person. It's not just taking applications and hiring people. It's dealing with all the federal and state laws that we have to stay on top of for employment. It's dealing with the day-to-day conflicts between employees and departments. It's the training that we're required. It's ensuring that we meet all of the required ethics training, the cybersecurity training, things that are being placed on us by not only state legislation, but DEOC and federal requirements. Finance is being reduced. The part-time people, of course, have shifted from 6 to 5. Lorena, who was our HR coordinator, has resigned. She's been very fortunate to transfer with her husband. So they are leaving us. So instead of being a 0.5 and a 0.5, we were taking the 0.5 from finance and we're making it a full-time HR. So that salary is not split anymore. Animal control would remain the same. This past fiscal year, Eddie and I had a conversation about building maintenance and keeping it a separate department. He was struggling with a lot of his employees. They do everything. They don't just pave roads, they do everything. So we had the conversation to move the building maintenance into street to fill a lot of the vacancies that he had that were budgeted. And so we have another mechanic that helps. But when he's not, working on the vehicles and equipment, he's out doing building maintenance. So we removed those positions and we added them to the street department, or to fill the vacancies he had. Parks and Recreation. This has been kind of a ongoing discussion, not just with your Parks Board, but in different council meetings with the priorities from the department directors. You have 12 parks that are actually maintained. They also assist during paving. They assist with events and other projects for 5 employees. So I am adding 1 more employee to help them so that they can keep up with that maintenance. One of the long-term things that the city will need to consider is, Pueblo Nuevo is just a plot of dirt right now. When that funding comes in and it becomes this beautiful park, we have to maintain it. Can't keep putting additional work on 5 people. They currently have 4 because 1 did leave to join the military. So it's not that we're overly staffed, but projects are changing and we need to move with it so that we can ensure we can cover it. Street department, we have 10 in the budget, and I'm looking at 3 new positions so that we can start bringing the paving back in-house. These wouldn't be your worker 1 positions, these would be higher positions so that Eddie can hire qualified individuals who have the heavy equipment operating information. Utility billing, this is split between water and gas. So utility billing, and this is reference to the water side, it's 2 and 2. So there's no change there. Once again, at the directors meeting, we talked about let's fill the positions we have before we keep adding. The water department had 15.5 budgeted. We're reducing it to 13. We haven't filled half the positions that were open. So we want to fill everything and then add. It's really easy to add. We need another employee, we can move the money around, but it's really hard to fire them because we don't have the money to pay them. So we're taking a more conservative approach and let's get the employees in, let's get them working. And then if we need to add another position or a half-time position, we can go and look at the budget and see where we're at. Wastewater, there's no change with the 3. Environmental services, Adelina has now been split between environmental services and buildings, so you went from 3 to 2.5. Hotels, no change. Airport, no change. The gas, there's no change, but I just wanted to indicate that this does include 2 customer service clerks. So there's 2 that are automatically out of the 8 that are actually handling the resident side, and then the rest are your field workers. A little discussion and conversation about employees and benefits and then the direction. I am a big proponent for employees. I've made that clear, and we want to do something for them every year, and it is harder every year because based on our budget policy, and this is being our #1 expense, this is where the cut will start. I am proposing, based on the changes that we've had within the departments, the reduction in some of the employees, the changeover where we have lower salaried employees, a 3% cost of living increase, and an additional 2% merit raise. So when we look at the budget, it's going to have a 5%. It's not, so in October when we address the cost of living, they don't get the 5%. It's the 3%, but then there's the 2% to allow them to have something to work towards. If you have an employee who's doing a great job, you don't want to say, well, I'm sorry, can't really help you. A little something goes a long way. The certification pay is also being considered. The water department has 5 employees, I believe, that need their certification to continue with the city. And so we want to ensure that it's in the budget. Certification is kind of you don't get it until you earn the certification, and it has to be within our policy. So I wanted to make sure that we included that as well as possible, an expense that could come up. And then longevity. So the city has approved longevity every year. It's $4 a month per month, as long as you've been here 90 days before November. It's a little bit confusing. So you may get $4. But I also wanted to make sure that when we look at things that the public and everyone understands, when you look at the salaries, it does include longevity as well. Our health insurance. So, and I apologize, it's not an HSA that's been stuck in my head, it's an HRA. Currently, the city provides $500 per employee, which is prorated for new hires and eligibility. These funds are actually not paid from the general fund, water fund, gas fund, airport. These are paid through our health insurance fund that was established many moons ago to cover the partially self-funded that the city was. So from our health insurance, when we went fully funded, we still had money in an account that was dedicated for health insurance. It's not money we could pull in and put somewhere else. We had to keep it in place until we ensured all of our partially self-funded funds and claims were covered. So we are utilizing it currently, and we have since 2020 to cover this claim. It's 500. So if you start in October, you get the full 500. But if you start in March, you wouldn't get the full 500. So it is prorated. Our health insurance, I spoke on this briefly at one of our other budget meetings. Riley Deering, I wanted him to come in and introduce himself with you guys. We're fighting for a 20% increase, and that's what, that was our target. That's what we were excited for, because our claims far exceeded our premiums. So we wanted to have a target. Well, he came back with a proposal. It's not solid or confirmed yet. We're looking at less than 10%. And that's to continue with Blue Cross Blue Shield at the same time that we currently have. I did touch base with him again. He's just waiting on some clarification with our dental and vision. Currently, we're with Humana on that. We're trying to see if we can roll it all into Blue Cross Blue Shield and deal with one vendor, one insurance instead of multiple. There are no changes with our life insurance. And then proposed retirement. So we are obligated to pay the city portion. Of course, the employees pay their portion. It's a little unique because it's done annually, January to December. So when I budget 3 months at the current rate and then 9 months per employee at the new rate. So last year we were obligated to pay 2.33% per employee. And then this year, or 2023, it's 1.96%. So it has gone down. We are fully covered with retirement. We are very fortunate when you look at other cities who chose not to fully provide. They're now having to pay a lot of money. And I mentioned the county because when I left the county, they were paying but a couple percent, and now they're at over 10% per employee. And that's their portion, not the employee's portion. So that was a bit interesting. Any questions so far?
What is our total head count? What are we looking at?
Right now, 83.
And those 3 that you're going to add to the streets at a higher rate in hopes of using them for paving. What is your thinking on how long we're going before we can get the equipment and actually bring it in-house?
So if the budget gets approved, we would submit RFPs, or if we see that they're on a purchasing co-op. A lot of the bigger companies are switching to co-ops because it goes faster. We'd like to have, and this would all have to go before council, because we'd have to decide if we wanted to lease it, or do we want to purchase it, or do we want to go into debt for it, put on a payment plan. We could have it within 3 to 6 months. But so during that time period, would also want to ensure that if we could get them hired, and we know we're not going to get them hired October 1st, and we know that that's not going to happen. But if we could advertise and get that enticement and people saying, hey, you know what, I don't want to be traveling back and forth, I want to stay in Alpine. There's a lot that department does, that those employees that we hire may be able to help assist with the training, can pick up some of the patching that we're falling behind on, and just overall help that department.
So how much have you added into the budget for this equipment and bringing it in-house?
So we're looking at the one piece of equipment, and it would be roughly, I believe, 95 or 92,000. But that's the prices when we got those quotes. So
machine is it?
it's a paving machine. That's the term they use. I provided the specs when I put the CIP together. I mean, one piece of equipment at a time. I know that Mr. Johnson was very helpful in helping me get information. They have it where we could buy every piece we would need, and then of course we could either lease it out or we could, you know, go out for some type of a debt for it. And we were trying to avoid the debt side, and I understand that. So we're looking at all the other options. But it's kind of a balance. If you look at what we have budgeted right now between the country club, the paving that was contracted with Jared, and what we do seal coating, if we reduce some of those sections to buy the piece of equipment, we can start building that back up.
How much do you anticipate paying an employee that can handle heavy equipment? I mean, I don't think anything under $30 an hour, right?
Cynthia, can you come up?
I don't want to.
Yeah, make sure everybody
I
can
know
hear.
Karen did it, and everyone's gonna have questions. And
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because really you cannot hear if you go back and you look at the video
Sorry,
from
Karen,
the
you can come up
audience.
too.
Yeah, I know it's a pain.
Okay, my question was, how do you anticipate paying the salary that a heavy equipment operator is requested, like if they're in the Odessa Midland are getting $35, $45 an hour?
We can't compete with Odessa.
Okay, so how do we anticipate bringing the heavy equipment and finding someone that will actually run it for $20 an hour?
So we're actually looking at the rates that the county is charging, which starts them off at 15 to 16, and then we have the CDL certification, and then of course cost of living in merit.
Yeah, because the county doesn't have the expenses we have, like utilities and water and all that stuff. And then you talked about moving building maintenance into filling some of Eddie's positions that were vacant.
Yes.
So Eddie's already running behind because he doesn't have enough help. So why are we adding building services to him?
He was over that department to begin with. He
Yeah,
still
I know
manages
that, but
department.
that's why we had hired people to take care of that. You proposed on the 2022-2023 salaries, a 3% increase on living cost, 2% on merit. Where's this kind of money coming from, since we don't have any?
It's a reduction in expenses.
From where?
We're not doing any additional fleet vehicles. A lot of the departments aren't adding any additional costs to their current budgets. Everyone's being more conservative. They're looking at how we can move forward, improve our employees, and keep doing our programs and jobs with what we have.
Okay, and you anticipate that happening, or do you have a plan B in the event it doesn't?
So that's why we're trying to take a little bit more conservative approach, so that if we have to make additional cuts, we can.
Okay,
I shouldn't say conservative. We're looking at it from both angles, the revenue and the expense. We don't want to hire a bunch of more people when we could provide for the people we have. So the next one is kind of just all departments. Every department has expenses that, I mean, they're not going to change no matter what. So insurance, property and auto, workman's comp, unemployment, utilities, electricity, phone, internet, cell phones, IT needs, office supplies, dues and memberships. These are kind of set. Some of these, like our IT, items are our phone, internet, electricity, those are contracted. Those are set rates. They're not going anywhere. We're looking at our insurance for the property auto. We're looking at a 10% increase there. TML has come back. We're not being hit on every area that we're covered, but we are being hit in some. Workman's comp, that is basically based off of our claims over the past 3 years. We have had a bit more claims come in on our auto side, which is one reason why we did get an increase there. Overall, workman's comp is down from an employee being hurt side, but our car accidents is not. Unemployment, this one of course is set that this isn't a rate that we can pick and choose. We get notified around December of the upcoming January change. Right now it's less than 2%. Last year and beginning of this year, it was a little bit crazier with the pandemic and all the employment that was paid out. We did get hit with a few quarters where it was a bit higher. Unemployment is also only based off of the first $9,000 an employee makes. So after that, you know, we're no longer paying for it. Office supplies, minimal. Everyone has pretty much made the decision to kind of cut back on that. We do share, believe it or not. We have a closet, Judy's seen it. We encourage people, I know PD used to come and take things, file folders, cut back there. And then dues and memberships. So this is a big one for the city as a whole, because we do have some rather large memberships that are paid. We are members of the Rio Grande Council of Governments. We are members of the Rio Grande Water Planning Association. And so those are larger expenses that get paid annually. And then you have your memberships for your different organizations. We want to encourage that people join something that will benefit them. I know for finance, it's the Government Finance Officers Association of Texas. It's not only for the networking, but they provide resources, online trainings that tend to be free. They do have annual conferences. They've become hybrid, in person and virtual. So they provide you a lot of the continuing education, things that are required for the positions. The next couple are just kind of a breakdown of the different departments and funds. The general fund, of course, will have the most. Some of these are key things. These are things that have been either discussed, considered, mentioned, come on my radar. So non-departmental is kind of our catch-all, doesn't necessarily apply to any one particular department. So we do have a lot of contracts that we pay out. Emergent Air, of course, is our ambulance. Family Crisis Center, library, our tax collection, appraisal board, and then our audit. This year, we will have to have a single audit. So it will cost us a little bit more because they are more detailed and specific, and we report those to the federal government.
Can you go into detail into what we give those before you move away from them? I mean, I know emergent, not going to change, or
I should have printed out the other one. Emergent's not going to change. Family Crisis is a little over $9,300 for this upcoming year. Library is $40,000. Tax collection will be about $21,000. Appraisal board is about $69,000. And the audit, we have it at $150,000. Which is what we scheduled it for this year as well.
and what's for the appraisal board? What?
About $69,000.
No, but what is that?
So we pay a percentage of how they collect our taxes. So they have a budget that they put together based on all of their employees, costs and all that. And based on the percentage of taxes collected for each entity, that's how they charge for their services.
And at this point, you're leaving the crisis center and the library at the same amount?
Yes. There's been no formal decision on what direction we want to go. Elections, this upcoming fiscal year, we'll have the 3 positions open for elections. So we're going to leave it at what's been budgeted. It's $10,000. City memberships and dues is kind of a reference to the last slide as well. We have several, like the Rio Grande Council of Governments, that they represent the whole entire city. IT, so we have the cost for the website. We do pay annually about $2,900 for the revised website. And then emails, we use Google Vault. So we pay per email. Not all of our employees have an email, but it's been very beneficial. So we pay about $650 right now a month for the emails we have. We are looking at other ways. We really would like every employee to have a city email because once we use a person's email, it becomes a source of public information. So I know our water department assigns Gmail accounts just specifically for them to utilize for work. The nice thing about the Google one is we have the Google Vault. Because emails are public records and we are required to keep them per state statutes, they kind of store it all for us. And then city council. So there is the proposal to reduce the discretionary based off the prior year's use of it. Some of the feedback that I've gotten from council as far as the different things you want to use it for and don't need it all, that would be reduced. I'm currently looking at 3,000 instead of 5,000. One of the things that's been brought up in multiple audits is the council salaries. There's no formal documentation that shows how much a council member is supposed to actually make. It's just been kind of a set, gone through. Every year we try to look through minutes, we try to find something that documents it. Based on our charter, you guys are allowed to set your pay rates. but it's not in effect until 6 months after, so it wouldn't actually go into effect until May. After an election, it's very specific. So we are recommending a change in the pay scale. We're looking at per meeting instead of it being a monthly, because we do have called meetings, emergency meetings, and a lot of other things that do come up. It would be better to track because we have the documentation for absences, would have, you know, who the documentation for when you guys are here, to have a per meeting rate. Based on the past 3 years, city council averages about 33 meetings a year. So we're looking at a per meeting for each council member and for the mayor. So that does slightly increase it from 7,500 to a little over 10,000. But part of it wouldn't be used until it could go into effect until May.
Okay, would that include being paid for missed meetings,
No, it would just be.
whether
you
they're
get-
excused or
No,
not?
you just get paid for the meetings you come to. And then there's no questions about it. And then the city attorney fees. So currently we have about 100,000 budgeted for city attorney fees, 90,000 kind of just across the board, and then we have 10,000 specifically for civil. I know as we get the bills and invoices, it's always kind of been a question. How much are we paying? What are we paying for? So I wanted to bring this up for discussion because we do have a set contract. It's $200 an hour. Council, city manager, and city secretary can request. Prosecutor is different. That goes to the municipal court. So I didn't know if you guys wanted to reduce it, to put a little bit more control on it, to have that conversation, but I wanted it to be out there so people are aware that this is something that does cost the city, and we are trying to keep on top of it. We look at the bills, we call Rod, we make notes, what's being covered, what is it costing us. Chris, you made a comment about the contracts and everything going through from a contract perspective. Ideally, what does a contract cost us? If from start to finish, are we looking at a couple thousand? Are we looking at?
It's just the reason I had an issue with that because it appears that now all the contracts are coming out. They're not coming from the city. They seem to be coming, the workers are bringing their contracts forward. So, I mean, with that being said, we look at them and we don't know if the city is okay with what the contract looks like.
So Rod is provided copies of all the contracts.
Okay. But I do have issues like with the budget workshops like this. I mean, at $200 an hour, for him to be here at a budget workshop, I don't think it's needed because there's nothing we're going to need from him at a budget workshop, really.
And that's where I want to have this conversation is, do we put some regulations on it? That's not probably the word to use, but some boundaries. Add a few extra things, not necessarily in his contract, but we can have that discussion with him and say, okay, these are the things that we want you to attend. We don't need you to attend.
Can you tell us where his budget is right now? Where he is? Is he in the red right now?
No, he's not in the,
He's on red, okay.
but we still have 3 months.
What is the average that we are paying him every month?
About 6,000. We've had a few high months and a few low months.
So are you wanting to have that discussion now, or you're wanting it for later?
Oh, no, I mean, I give me some ideas so that I can put something together. We can make it an agenda item if needed. Or we can budget accordingly so that when we look at the budget, I can put it for a lower amount. And
I think we need to put some restrictions. That's a lot of money going out. For one thing, I know council is we can go to him for legal advice. But I think there's been quite a few times when I've spoken to you about this, that council goes to him, and we're getting charged when we could have gone to you or Geo and gotten the answer without being charged. So I think that's a way for us to save money, not automatically pick up the phone and call him, because we might be able to get that answer from somebody else.
And I think for the most part that we usually do contact Geo and Megan prior to even contacting, Mr. Ponton. So I think that occurs more often than not.
I know you guys contact Geo a lot.
But there have been quite some charges in there that could have been done without had we contacted you all, right?
So it's just internal procedures. Is there any information that council would like to better understand his billing?
I don't like it when we get something that says we're gonna hire an outside attorney. We have an attorney. And we're either gonna use him or we're not. And
But
that's my
sometimes
personal
I
opinion.
think there's a conflict of interest.
If there's a conflict, that's one thing, but if there's not, there's no sense. I agree with you. Why are people writing, why is Gilbert writing his own contract? Why didn't Rod write it? We have a contract he could go by. Didn't Jody Cole have a contract?
She had a contract.
So
I don't know who wrote
we
her
couldn't
contract.
we couldn't have adjusted it and turned it into
So
Gilbert.
Gilbert was given Jody Coles and Sandy Wilson's contracts. I don't know who wrote either one of them.
Who provided those contracts to him?
I didn't provide them. I let Geo.
Why does he get paid to prepare for meetings? I mean, as council persons and anybody else out there doing their job, we don't get paid to prepare to do our job. I mean, that's quite a bit of time being, and and I can understand if we have asked for something on Airbnbs or something that he's having to prepare ahead of time. But for him to charge to prepare for every single meeting when there's quite a few that he doesn't have anything that he's going to present or anything. We don't get paid extra to go through our package and look at it and spend time on it to prepare for the meeting. We just get paid for the meeting.
I can ask him. I can't speak on his behalf.
So that's something that, there's another place that we can.
Shave it out or sorry.
It's okay.
Any other?
Are we gonna come back to this at some point and talk more about it in detail, or?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I want to put something together so that it can be their discussion item on the agenda. Because you'll want interaction with Rod. And Rod was hired by council. So if we need to have an executive meeting or an open meeting specifically to address moving forward with his services, some of the boundaries, then we can do that. But I just wanted to get input to kind of come up with a little template for everybody.
And does he not get evaluated like everybody else?
I don't believe that's in his contract, but like I said, council hired him. So if you guys wanted to evaluate him or have that conversation, you guys are definitely able to do that. Or have an annual review. If it's anything pertaining to the legal side of what's going on in the city, you will want to have that executive because you'll be consulting the attorney. But if you just want a regular update of day-to-day stuff, then I definitely think that's something I would encourage you to do. It's after 5 on Wednesday. I'm gonna make a side note for that one.
Please.
So do you know how his contract compares to other cities that are somewhat similar to us?
Wasn't his contract taken from the previous city attorney?
Yes. It's pretty much been a template contract, I believe, for about.
I think it's not so much a matter of the price that I have. I mean, what we're paying him that I have a problem with. I think we just need some more controls.
Mayor, did you get your answer? Anything else? So administration, so for this upcoming year, we're looking at trying to put in a full-time records clerk. We currently have a part-time one who has done wonders with our current record system, including redoing the vault. It's kind of created an internal process to find things, getting things updated. Geo has been to several trainings and learned records are hard to keep up with. Every city has a problem. Nothing's new. Of course, the transfer of the grant writer into administration instead of finance. And then we do have the administrative assistant. I am not moving forward with an executive assistant. I really just need an assistant that can help with day-to-day tasks. Simple things, returning phone calls, following up on emails, making copies, setting, things like that. We are also set to do the TML conference in October of 2022. So this is should be a wash. We are allowed to charge per person who comes to the TML conference. So what we charge and what we spend to try to even out. We are looking at venues and working with TML. The city secretary for Odessa will actually provide us more of the date when it will happen. And then they'll also provide us kind of what the training or conversation will be at for that. Some of the ones that I've been to, they've gone over ethics, they've gone over Open Meetings Act, public safety. They try to have a little bit of an educational side to it as well.
When you say a venue, could we not use our own venue to, where we're not having to spend on that?
So the one thing that is hard to do, we can use the Civic Center, but requiring or asking our employees to continuously set up for meetings and big events like that, it's been a little bit harder. So we're looking at both. The Civic Center is an option, but then it's the staffing to actually put it together. Are we serving food? Who do we contract to serve the food? What's available? So we're looking at that. And then we're looking at, is there someone that could be like a one-stop shop where maybe they'll charge us a flat fee no matter what, or are we paying different individuals and different vendors? We're looking at every avenue. We've had it up at Sol Ross before as well, utilizing the Hikaigo, I believe it's Espinizo room.
Espino conference.
Thank
center.
you.
I wanted it too, so I did well just saying it 4 months station.
So those are other options we have. And we use Aramark to help cater it. We're trying to relieve some of the added responsibilities on staff as well, so that we can encourage them to go, participate, enjoy, not have to be there to clean it up, to help set it up and stuff like
I think making it to Saros is a good idea, because we would be able to help them. You know, Aramark would be getting paid and that type of thing. Be a way to help Saros.
that. I've got a few. We need a date before we can actually lock anything down. That's the one thing people ask, well, what date? Well, I don't know, just October. Could be November. We're not 100% sure yet. The travel and training. So Geo is on the path to get the certifications for being a city secretary, and his is required to take so many courses or modules, I believe is what you call them, in order to do it within the 4 years that he'd like to. Not all of these are available online, so they do involve travel to go take them. The resources, rentals of books and all that to study. And then of course, there's a few items as city manager, just mainly continuing education. I am a certified public funds investment manager that I'd like to keep. So having that, and then just some of the conferences that come up specifically addressing small communities, and then the Texas City Managers Association. So those are ones that we think we can keep within the current budget. But between Geo and I, we want to ensure that we're both covered and we're not pulling straws and who gets to go do what. The other big expense out of administration is Municode. Every time we update an ordinance, we send it off to Municode to update our online visibility with Municode, and then of course they provide a paper copy for our books. Over the past couple of years, we've had some really big ordinances that have come up. Moving forward, we have even bigger ordinances. The one that is outdated online is our utilities. We've been really working. I know Keith and Randy have sat down and we're getting that one cleaned up to ensure that one, it's up to date. Two, it addresses everything that we needed to address, and that it doesn't contradict other parts of our ordinances. When you do a search for certain things, you'll find that it comes into different chapters within our ordinances, and we want to make sure they all reflect the same. The other big one would be boards and commissions. Geo's been working on that. So when we take all of those sections out and we put them into one consolidated chapter, that is a huge update to our Municode. They go in and they do all the work to ensure that everything lines up the way we present it to them. So we are looking at those expenses for this upcoming year. And of course, there is a leased vehicle in the administration. There are no proposed changes for municipal court. The police department, Daryl and I have spoken on this, and he doesn't have any major changes coming forward. He's going to run his department within the current budget. There is a little bit of decreasing because of the turnover with personnel. The salaries does go down a little bit. We did get a drug dog donated. So that is an additional expense that we will budget for. That's just the care of the dog. That's the food, the shelter, any medical vet bills. So Copsync, this has been an ongoing, Dale and I have spoken on multiple occasions. They're increasing the price. So Copsync is the current software that they utilize for a lot of their
Report management system.
or their management,
Report management system.
RAS tickets and stuff like that. So he's been working with them. They're proposing a 1-year renewal, 3-year renewal, 5-year renewal, kind of spreading the prices out. So we're looking at that. And then the continuation of video magistrate. So that is something that we've been paying for the past 2 years. We were in hopes to cancel it. Jody Cole then stepped down, and so Gilbert Valenzuela would like to continue it. So it's $1,800 a year. It's not a huge expense, but it is. The leased vehicles, we had budgeted for 2 new vehicles this year through the lease. We ordered one in January, February timeframe. We're still pending it. We have not received it, which means we're not paying on it, but it has been ordered. So that one will change the leased vehicles, but it will be a decrease from what we budgeted. So for moving next year, that line item will decrease because it won't have the 2. Until we get that vehicle, obviously, we're not making payments on it. So if we don't receive it until December, then we save a little bit more money. We are not moving, as mentioned, we're not moving forward with any new fleet vehicles. Enterprise is having a hard time as well, just getting the information. So we're not moving that direction, and everyone is aware. The fire department. As mentioned, the removal of the part-time assistant position. That's the position in all of the retirement and FICA. I have not included any additional equipment. We're still pending an inventory. I've spoken with the new chief and some of his employees, or not employees, volunteers on a few occasions with the importance of understanding what they have and what they need. So this has actually been like an ongoing thing. This isn't new. The county was going through the same thing with understanding what do you have? What can we get rid of? What do we need? What needs to be replaced? So my understanding is that they've been working on a type of inventory. We just haven't received anything to be able to really fully assess what we could help with.
And anything we get, does the county share that cost with us, or how does that go?
So the county, and then I can't speak on their behalf, when we went into the interlocal agreement, the county gave everything over to the city. So all of the vehicles, assets, everything was given to the city to manage. The county does provide some funding to assist them with day-to-day repairs and things like that. I don't know how much. I don't know if they've cut it. I know that at one point the volunteer fire department had their own fund within the county. I can't answer if that's still there or not. So the city does provide a bigger chunk at some point. The county also did more grants for them. So a lot of the things that they got were from grants. So the county managed that side. The city's always managed from what I understand since I've been here, the call outs, the maintenance, and then up until the building was built, they had a city-owned building. So it's kind of a very spaghetti bowl mixture of how the two have assisted the volunteer fire department. And I don't know if anyone else was here, but at the presentation that Andrew presented, they're taking an active approach with the community and they're getting donations. So they have their own source of money as well that they manage. It has nothing to do with the city or the county that they can utilize. Andrew had mentioned that they were doing the breathing apparatuses. We had put money aside for them, utilizing the money that had been donated by ETP, specifically for the fire department, but they're moving forward with getting that taken care of themselves. So I'm looking at it from a budget expense, providing more for the maintenance of what they currently have. Because the vehicles and equipment are all now city assets, ensuring that they're maintained. There are some things that our mechanics can handle themselves, and then there are some things that they can't because they are required to be, and I know Andrew mentioned it, there's a search and certification for fire safety that has to be utilized for some of the heavier equipment. Like Ruben Hernandez, who is our mechanic, couldn't go fix a ladder truck. he can tell you it's broken, but the mechanics and all that is slightly different. So looking at more increasing their vehicles and equipment.
But Megan, we don't maintain that building.
No, so we do
So
pay.
we're out from under that.
Yeah, so we don't maintain the building, we do pay the phone bill, and then we have the call outs. So the county does, part of the agreement was that the county would provide us, basically, we would invoice the county for expenses for fires that our fire, or that's not ours, the volunteer fire department responded in the county. And so on a quarterly basis, we would send them an invoice. We're back on track with that. Judy brought that to my attention. I had a sticky note that said hold. So I've sent them the invoices up until March, because we hadn't completed this fiscal year, this past quarter. So we charge them for the call outs. So it's $10 a person per call out. And then we charge them the FEMA rate for the equipment that's utilized. So the fire department submits a report sheet that basically says when they were called out, where they were called out, who responded. They have to sign that they responded, and then what equipment was used, and then any particular notes. So for instance, the house that right over there by the new uncles, that was in the county, that wasn't actually in the city. So everything that was utilized, we invoiced the county per FEMA rates. The FEMA rates do change. They recently changed in 2021. We've updated that as well. So anything from 19 to September of 2021 was at one rate, 2021 and moving forward is at.
So what we get from the county, does it go back to the general fund or?
Yes, it goes to the general fund. That's the 20,000 that we had budgeted. So they've been invoiced for a little over 13,000 and we still have 2 quarters. And it really, this is the one revenue source that I don't really hope we get, only because that means we've had an active fire season. Building services, the big change, of course, is in building services, this is our building official, permit, and code enforcement. Building maintenance is different. So we are now fully staffed. Our new building official will start Monday. Everyone is very excited, including Jessica. The big things to take in consideration are the enforcement cleanup. So this is the illegal dumping. Adelina will be doing a presentation next week. We are allotted up to 100 cubic yards per quarter. And then after that, the city pays for all of the additional illegal dumping that we pick up. So it's making sure that we include this in our budget so that we can cover those costs. It is a very active program. They have definitely mapped this out. They have a whole process set in place, and we want to encourage not only the group that's putting this together, Adelina and Jessica, but there's a whole educational side that's coming from this as well. So we want to make sure that we can continue that. And then abatement. One of the things that has been brought to Daryl, Jessica Borse, and my attention is in 2018, Building and Standards recommended a couple buildings be torn down, to be demolished, condemned. Not sure how the terminology you'd like to use. It was never done. And so we've gotten quite a few complaints from people who live next to these buildings. Of course, there is no funding to do this, but we also learned that we can't locate because there's a process, there's a legal way to do this. And the notifications, the hearings, the building and standards, and everything has a process. And so we've been going back through old records and we know that it was approved, but we have none of the paperwork to prove it. So I know Jessica has gone through any of the files that were left with the building services and has tried to find things. This is on Rod's radar, something that we will need to move forward with, but we also need a building and standards commission to finalize the process. So we wanted to try and include a little bit of funding for this so that if it goes through the whole process and we can get these buildings torn down, that we can pay for it. During the process, there is also the option that we try to get the owner to do it. Obviously, the owner wasn't willing to do it prior, so we don't think that has changed, but we definitely want to get these taken care of.
So do we contract out for that, or does the city do some of that cleanup?
So the one and only time that I have ever known that it's happened since I've been here is we contracted.
Megan, may I?
Come on up.
Those abatements on removing or condemning those properties, all that documentation is in the public and building and standards packets that were sent out to the people that were on that committee. The
I
only,
flipped through that and I haven't been able to find out.
they were all backed up in there because they had all the, and so they were also with all of Victor's paperwork, and I'm sure that all that got destroyed as well. The only time that council or the city did destroy one of the properties, we took the deed off that property, but they forgot to file it. So technically, at the end of the day, it wasn't even ours. You know, but we don't have money to tear them down. They don't have money to tear them down. And this has been an ongoing process. Daryl, how long have we been working on the one on Murphy Street that belongs to Ramos? Since 2002?
Ramos, which, the address?
The old barber shop belonged to Tony's dad,
Oh,
2002,
yeah.
somewhere around there. And that one's still standing. So again, they don't have money, we don't have money, so I don't know what other option we would have to be able to clear some of those buildings that need to be taken down.
Excuse me. The one option I was thinking about this a while back was if they're not paying for their taxes, we can always put it on the foreclosure. And hopefully somebody with money will buy it and demolish it and take care of themselves.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Because I know the one over on Avenue H, she wasn't paying her taxes. And she received the records that the house was going to be demolished. And so she wasn't paying on it. When nothing happened, and she was contacted by the tax office, she started paying the taxes on it again. So, I mean, that's always an option. Because I know there's a lot of people that have been buying property on the south side trying to refurbish it, so.
The problem would be that if they start paying their taxes, the building
Yes.
still needs to be condemned.
Yes,
There was one, Foothills,
yes.
the back taxes on that was $48,000.
Can you come up?
Sorry, thought I was screaming and not.
No.
Foothills had over $48,000 on back taxes. We actually auctioned it off and the individuals paid the $48,000 to get the property, the Foothills and the two homes that are next to Martin's property. They're actually boarded up Foothills, but they haven't boarded up the rest of the houses and people were actually sleeping in there. And they have yet to tear those down as well or repair them. So, I mean, the taxes could be, you know, but they're not following through with it.
So just one more piece of data, Rick Stevens, Ward 5. The Building Standards Commission is a judicial commission. They can issue orders to have things torn down. You put a lien against the property. When the property is sold, the city gets recoups all the cost and the taxes get paid. So there is a legal way to do it. And that's why Building Standards was set up separate from the other boards and commissions. It is a legal entity.
So just some clarification, we spoke to Rod and we would require the notices that were sent to the owners and proof that it was sent to the owners, and we haven't been able to locate those notices. I have looked through the packets and the packets do contain minutes that show that it was approved. Really, that's the biggest issue, and building and standards haven't met since probably 2018, maybe early 2019. I'm not sure as to why, but they stopped meeting and they have never met since. So I think we need to reevaluate those appointments. And as I stated in my email to you all earlier with the boards and commissions, once we iron out the details, I think we could really look at getting it put together again.
That's something we need to plan for you.
Thank you for working on that.
So how much did you put aside for that?
I'm looking at 10,000. It may or may not even put a dent in it. If we contract it out, it really is a hit and miss on who will do it. I know Sam White did the last one and it was a little under 10,000. And that was the trailer on Murphy and 13th or 14th. 13th.
So could we possibly do it to where like they tear down, but the city staff, and I know they've got so much more, but clean up or something?
I think they tore it down and we paid the disposal fees. Like, they didn't pay to take it to the landfill. We took care of that. But they tore it all down and
So that could basically be just for one.
gotta start with one at least.
Did the city do the one on Harriet?
Not that I'm aware of. Where, Daryl?
On Harriet, we had an order on Harriet.
It did.
That's what you were referring to.
So human resources, the change from part-time to full-time, but that funding, of course, is just reducing the finance expenses for personnel and going into HR. And then the drug testing, so when Dr. Sanchez left his practice to go into the hospital, they stopped doing the drug testing for the city of Alpine. So we actually do our drug testing internally. We've gone, our HR person had been trained, gone through and got certified. So all the drug testing from all the departments will go to zero and will go into human resources, not at the full amount from all the departments, because we're not paying the full amount like we were paying Dr. Sanchez's office. We're only paying for the testing kits themselves. And we do have two drug tests. One is urine and one is a mouth swab. We do use them based off of new employment, probable cause, and then if they have an accident in the city vehicle or with city property. If we have to go outside of that, we do have a place in Fort Stockton. The reason why we chose part of the reason why we chose Fort Stockton is a chain of custody that's required, especially for our gas department. So the gas department is required by Railroad Commission to randomly drug test their employees, and it has to follow specific forms. And then Daryl has had to use it for a couple of his new employees as well. We did it for Andrew. So that is a little bit more of expense, but it would come out of human resources.
Question about that?
My name is Karen Cantrell. I'm in Ward 1, and you said you do 2 specific tests. Now, do you ever test for alcohol? Do you do spot tests for alcohol in the mornings?
We don't do random drug testing.
You don't?
We do probable cause drug testing. So
Oh,
someone actually has to go through a whole process.
okay, I'm just curious, but so there's no alcohol testing at all?
Not randomly, no.
Thank you.
So finance department, of course, there is a current and future change in personnel. With Lorena leaving, I have an employee retiring next month. And then of course, moving one to administrative assistant in admin. It will be a new department. So the salaries will be slightly lower because you don't have the tenure employees there anymore. The big expense that comes out of finance is our accounting software. So we do pay an annual maintenance fee. It's a little under $10,000. We utilize Hill Country software, so that is a big expense. And then I do expect the travel and training. We didn't utilize it as much this year, but I do expect that to increase to cover the new employees. We want to get them out there and we want them to network and understand the different resources that they have available. Animal control doesn't have a increase or decrease in their staffing, but we do foresee an increase to cover the new employees in travel and training. Jennifer works really hard to get her animal control officer certified within the first year. It is a week-long training. It's kind of a hit and miss where they offer it. She's been lucky to get El Paso. We've sent one to Austin. They're not something that we can really get them to come here to do for us. We've tried, she did an awesome job this year with the euthanization. You do have to be trained and certified to be able to do that. And she actually got someone to come to Alpine to perform that training for not only our employees, but the people in the area. The hard part with that, they want a minimum. They want at least 10 employees. We try to encourage Marfa, Presidio, Fort Stockton. I think we even reached out to Monaghan's to send people this way so that we can try to build up that training here. It's just really hard. We used to have Tceq's training within the city of Alpine. They would come and they would do a lot of the basic water stuff and wastewater. That stopped because they were coming for one employee and it was usually one of ours. So without getting the people to come to do the trainings, it's hard to keep them coming to our city. The big thing for her expenses, of course, are the animal care, cat condos, spray and neuter program, and of course, they have leased vehicles as well. The spray and neuter program was something we implemented this year. So she'd like to continue it. It's working rather well for them. It's a big education program as well. The one thing that's not listed here, and you'll see it in another slide, of course, is building maintenance. So those are their bigger expenses. Building maintenance. So building maintenance, like as mentioned, we removed those employees and put them in the street department. But this is all of your basic maintenance for the city-owned facilities. So ACO has a long wish list of things to keep up with. So we are budgeting for additional improvements within their building. It's just basically animals tear things down. They tear them up, and it's going in and putting in some new paint, some new flooring, things that little puppies like to chew up is drywall. And so it's a little bit of replacement there and putting up things to prevent that in the future. So instead of putting up new drywall and walking away, it's putting up the new drywall and then putting the panels over there so that the animals can't destroy it. Eddie's been requesting this for some time, and this was part of his presentation to the council, and it is in the current budget. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to finish it this year, is a new fleet facility. So this would be added to their current shop. If you've ever been out there, it's up on 9th Street. They want to add another section instead of cramming the maintenance and the mechanics all in one little space. This would give them the additional space to fix the heavy equipment, to fix the city-owned vehicles. We did remove the fleet maintenance from our enterprise contract so that we could do it all in-house. It does tend to be cheaper for us because one, we're not taking it to a vendor who's going to charge whatever they're going to charge. And then enterprise does charge us those flat rates, whether we use it or not. The reduced personnel that also assists, and then just the basic ongoing maintenance call. Oh, sorry about my typo there, for all city buildings. So the city-owned buildings are, the new one will be the Sunshine House, City Hall, the Civic Center, the Animal Control, Water, or the old Municipal Court and PD, that's a city-owned facility. The gas department, actually, that's part of the gas department and they maintain that one themselves. That is not an asset within the general fund. That is actually part of the gas department. And then the visitor center is actually a building that's owned by the city. It is not owned by the visitor center. So I know people say, well, let's just use hot funds. That's actually a city building. It's not a tourist building. So parks and recreation, the big expenses. When you look at their budget, a lot of it is their employees. We would like to increase it by 1 employee. The required $75,000 to match the Texas Parks and Wildlife grant. They really don't have big expenses except for park maintenance, pool maintenance, and their leased vehicles. One of the things that they've been able to do well is, as they've replaced equipment, is maintaining it and keeping it at a lower cost. For the pool, it's kind of depends on what goes wrong over the winter. What do we need to fix? What do we need to replace? I know that this year we did repaint the pool. The pool maintenance also includes the supplies for chemicals, the chlorine. If you weren't aware, there was a chlorine shortage. It was kind of a free-for-all. Everyone's calling anyone who had chlorine. We tried to borrow it from the water department. Water department wants it. It's just kind of a fight for it. So that was an expense that we didn't predict would be a little bit higher, but it was. The park maintenance, so we budget $20,000 to maintain the 12 parks. And that's everything from your sprinkler systems to the mowing, to the replacement of things, the perimeters, the equipment itself, it has to be fixed. The buildings that are associated with them, the restrooms that are associated with them. So $20,000 for 12 parks isn't a lot. I know the Parks Board is also evaluating and looking at that as well. When we take on additional parks, like Pueblo Nuevo, like I said, it's a lot of dirt right now. Apparently it's a good parking lot for some people. That will increase our park maintenance. So things that we need to be aware of now and moving forward. The street department, it's the 3 additional positions. These are, like I said, these are just the big expenses that we're looking at. The seal coating and patching, sign replacement, contracted paving. The country club estates, they're getting their road to where it needs to be, paving equipment and leased vehicles, vehicle maintenance, equipment maintenance. Equipment is a growing expense. They're trying their best to utilize what they have. Some of their items aren't as old, but they're breaking down. And so getting them replaced. Ruben does what he can. He is a great mechanic. We're very lucky to have him. His assistant is Andrew. But they're limited. So sometimes we do have to go out to the actual dealer or the vendor who sold us to get it fixed. The hot patch machine, last year, we spent about $27,000 to get it back up and running. So these are big expenses that we get hit with. Travel and training. So we encourage all of our departments, and you've heard it repeatedly, especially with our utilities, is, we want them to get certified. We want them to get trained. Well, in 2021, the state hit us with new requirements for CDL. So we can't exactly just send them to our DPS office and put them in a tractor or a heavy piece of equipment and let them drive. They are now required to take specific training. The minimum we have found is a week-long offered in El Paso, about $3,000. And that doesn't mean you finish with your CDL. You still have to do your testing. So it's hard to encourage an employee. We want you to get your CDL so that you can utilize this equipment. But we can't afford it now. So I know Eddie and Rio sat down with me to discuss this, and we're trying to look at, well, we currently have one CDL operator in the street department. Would like to look at getting at least one more and then just build it up. This is one of those things that we want to encourage an employee to work towards, because it does come with a certification pay of $1 an hour increase. So those are important to us, especially if we want to start bringing in paving in the heavy equipment side. Any questions on the general fund? So public utilities, this is water, wastewater, and sanitation. So utility billing, their big expenses, of course, is personnel, software, annual maintenance. So the system that we use, for years, we've tried to work with the SIS to try to combine it, so we only pay one. There's no factor that will tie together. We can't do it by name, we can't do it by address. It will have to be a voluntary come in and combined. So that's a big one. And then our mailing. So the postage and mailing supplies, we did bring that back in-house, and I will say that I've had fewer and fewer complaints with not getting their bills. We do have a stack that when someone comes in and says, I haven't gotten my bill, we go through the stack, we give it to them, verify the address, we update addresses that the post office lets us know about, because they'll say forwarding address, we can correct it. We still do have kind of an issue with the posting. We do get some return that we're kind of like, but this has been this gentleman's address for 40 years. Nothing has changed. Still working those kinks out. And then of course they pay an administrative fee, which goes to the general fund as revenue. The water, of course their big expense is personnel. And they have a lot of reoccurring or required fees. These are things that we have to include in our budget. The JD water district fees. For those of you who don't know, Jeff Davis County is where we get our water from Mooskies. Those are where all of our wells are located. We do pay a fee to them annually. It averages between 12 and 14,000. It is dependent on how much water we pull from them. We do have metered wells out there, so we do keep track of what we pull. We do have TCQ fees that are required that we pay. A lot of this is tied to our permitting. We pay a quarterly fee to them. Membership and dues, we do utilize and encourage them to utilize those organizations that can provide training, to provide resourcing. US Communities Unlimited, sorry Keith, we're utilizing them. We want to look at the Texas Water Rural Development, just ones that they can bring in. All of our employees are required to have TCQ licenses, which means they're required to have continuing education. And if we can pay a membership fee and get that resource in return where they have access to virtual or online and or in person and it's cheaper, take advantage of it. Of course, insurance, water is tied to debt payments, and then they have their administrative and franchise fees that they pay to the city general fund. Other big ones is maintenance in general. So this isn't just your new projects and you're fixing your leaks and things like that. We have our well fields, our storage tanks, our line maintenance, our fire hydrants, our SCADA, and all of the chemicals that were required, mainly chlorine, to ensure that the water is drinkable. So these are continued expenses that we have to have. We can't just one day say, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. That's not an option. They do have leased vehicles, vehicle and equipment maintenance. There is the replacement of the backhoe that Keith had brought up that would like to get in there. Of course, fuel and oil. I have encouraged that we share rides. Instead of having 5 employees out in individual vehicles, if we're going to a work site, let's try to combine it into less. Of course, safety equipment. This is one that we haven't focused on as strongly in the past, but if you've noticed when you're out there, we are required to provide a certain level of safety. Signs, vests, hard hats, anything on a state highway, TxDOT can come and tell us to stop, especially if we don't have the proper signage. And it is hard. You have guys who are constantly running 24/7 who just want to get the job done. They don't want to go put a sign 50 feet in front, 50 feet behind, put their hard hat. They just want to jump in the hole, fix it, and go home. So this is one that we would like to look at it and focus on so that we keep our employees safe and then the public is also aware, hey, they're working right there. Travel and training. Right now we're looking at just the TCQ required. Like I mentioned, once you get your license or even to get your license, you have to have certain classes and courses and training. So we want to encourage that we maintain this. Facility maintenance and uniforms. Most of our utilities, gas and outside field workers all have uniforms that are provided by us. The wastewater, my biggest project, the one I'd like to see accomplished. It's not just their personnel, but their big ones are distribution, which is our line maintenance, which is your sewer backups. There's everything coming in and out of that facility. Your chemicals, your testing, they are required to test that. Just go through the plan and come out the end throughout the whole process. There are testing that they have to do. Not only do we do some of them in-house, but we send some of them away because we don't have the availability to do it. And of course, they have a SCADA system. The wastewater treatment plant. As mentioned at the last budget meeting, we really are looking for a mosaic of funding. We're looking for the best bang for our buck. I spent my lunch today on an environmental protection agency training for the infrastructure funding. And how is this billions and billions of dollars going to affect the city, especially small rural? There was over 1,000 people on this wanting to know. At the end of the day or end of my lunch, I walked away with the state controls it. Everything will run through Texas Water Development Board. But I now have some insight that there are portions of it that are 100% grant or loan forgiven. So I felt like I walked away with a secret, something that if the Water Development Board said, oh, we're going to give it to you at a loan and we're going to give it to you at 80 or 90%. Oh, no. We have some knowledge. We have some information. So I'm hoping as that money dwindles down to the state that we can grab and move forward with it. We're looking at other sources with the USDA. The USDA does have a higher forgiveness on loans and they do offer more grant funding. So we're working with them as well. We're, like I said, we're looking everywhere we can. I don't want this to come out of our pockets and I don't want it to come out of our residents' pockets, but at the end of the day, it has to be fixed. And we know that. They also have TCQ fees that are required. We pay those quarterly. Travel training, same, it's the TCQ requirements. We are still encouraging the 2 employees who have not passed their B to get their B. It's an asset. It's not just an asset for the city of Alpine, but it's an asset to the employee. We don't want them to leave, but we want them to know that they have options and that we're providing these for them. And if something happens and then they moved away, that, you know, they have that to take with them. Of course, the safety equipment. They do have leased vehicles, uniforms, and then the administration franchise fees to the city. Environmental services, there won't be much changing in this one, but some of the big ones that come from this department, of course, are personnel, the recycling center maintenance. The glass crusher does cost us a little bit of money. Part of the agreement with the county is that we settled with the 40,000 and then we'll increase it by 5%. That helps cover some of these costs. So that's a benefit. Travel and training, uniforms. TCQ fees, they are also tied to TCQ with our landfill. We do pay payments to TCQ for that. And then they have a environmental services fund. You'll see that in the budget at 20,000. So this is all the projects. If you've ever seen the little people walking around with the orange vest down the alleys, that's most likely Adelina and her team. They encourage Sol Ross to help out. The football team has done numerous cleanups. The public, I know Karen had mentioned about volunteering. We got a list last night of people who could help us. This is what she utilizes that money for, the cleanups. So when we do cleanups, we have to ensure, of course, the safety, the best. We have grabbers, the trash bags. Some of it we do get donated from TxDOT, especially for cleaning up any of the right of ways. They'll give us a big old box of trash bags. Of course, it's all the public education as well. So she does a lot of community outreach programs. They may not be something that people will notice, but she's at a lot of our events. She's at the park, she's at the Earth Day. She tries to work with the schools. She tries to interact with the people as they're coming in and out of the recycling center. One of her other big projects, of course, is tire disposal. So we do allow people to dispose of tires for a small fee at the recycle center. We do not allow businesses to. So Oasis couldn't come and drop off a trailer of tires for $5 a piece. But the city does pay to dispose of them. So we do have an expense that's tied to that. And then, of course, they have the administrative and franchise fees as well.
And she always gets those McDonald's coupons.
She's your go-getter. Sonic, McDonald's. When volunteers come out, you're not just benefiting your community, but you get a happy meal with it. So, and it's actually a little bit of fun. I got to prune trees. Don't know how to prune trees. Don't recommend I ever do it again, but you learn something new. The airport. So this one is for Abel. He's not here. The personnel, that's a big expense. We are going to try and encourage some travel and training. They get very little travel and training besides what's available online. So we want to encourage them to be able to access some of the resources. TxDOT has a conference with aviation that provides a wealth of information. It's not just vendors and swag and what can we sell and buy, but they run through all of the different programs that TxDOT Aviation has to offer and some of the requirements that are needed for our airport. So we have the airport assurances, understanding FAA, the rules and regulations. And so this is important information. The facility maintenance, equipment maintenance, they're doing their best. That new tractor, they don't want it to run down. They don't want it to miss that one maintenance and something go wrong. So they're keeping on top of that. The fuel storage. So the airport has the 2 big fuel storage tanks outside. And so it's making sure that they're maintained. They are monitored regularly. The filters have to be replaced. They sump, which is they remove a little bit of the fuel to make sure that whatever's at the bottom, there's not a lot of buildup, rocks, material that could possibly get in that aren't filtered. Their biggest expense, of course, is fuel. It's also their biggest revenue source. So that one's in there. We are required to maintain our AWAS system, which is the automated weather. This is what tells pilots when they're coming in, the conditions. It's also where we can post NOTAMs. So we are required to have that. They pay administration fees. The 2 big ones that will be proposed, and this will be rough, is we have a taxiway we have to finish. We put 60,000 aside this year because we had some cash flow and ramp grant that we could utilize. But the Woodwards and the Toplesses would like this finished. They're at the point where, you know what, we'll just do it ourselves. And, you know, how do we do this? How do we move forward with it? It does affect their businesses. They can't utilize the hangar completely if they can't get the airplanes to access it properly. So we are looking at that. Ms. Woodward was very informative. She provided an additional vendor that didn't even know existed out of Midland that, you know, would like to do some paving and has all the equipment, has done some paving for other hangars out there. So we're gonna grab that information and hopefully go out for another RFP. He would come in fairly cheaper. So we're kind of excited that that resource was provided to us. The other big one is the city requested all of these projects for the airport because we need them. No ifs, ands, or buts, we need them. When talking with the airport planner, it was prioritizing which ones were more important. So we are currently in the construction of our new lighting system. It's not the most advanced lighting system, but we will no longer be the only city in Texas with the oldest lighting system. That was a great conversation at the bid meeting for that one. So we have that project going on. So the other projects that the city has been looking at, of course, is continued repairs of the runways and the taxiways, the relocation of the AWAS. Currently where the AWAS is located, you can't build within 500 feet and you can't build to a certain height. So it kind of prevents us from growth. Well, what also prevents us from growth is in order to ensure we have a plan, we have to have an updated plan that is filed with Tceq Aviation. Our plan, last I checked, I believe is from 2012. We have not followed it. It happens. So one of the things that we requested was to help with the master plan to get it updated. When we get this updated, it shows the growth. It shows the hangar path. It shows how we can build. It shows, you know, can we add another runway? Can we change things? What options do we have? And so that is set for fiscal year 23 to come down the pipeline. That is not a guarantee. Much like a lot of our funding for some of our bigger projects like Pueblo Nuevo, this is backed by the federal government as well. So if it does come down in 23, we would be looking at a match of $25,000. So this would be an expense that we would need to be able to provide. The airport does struggle. They pretty much bring in a little bit less than what they spend, but it is an asset to the city. Everyone has used it at one point or another in their life. Anyone who's flown out for medical reasons has used it. The big one that everyone will hear about is Amazon. You order from Amazon, you use our airport. So we want to try to do our best. I am going to include to just see what the difference is as far as how much overage we would be. The city would need to take into consideration how are we going to fund these projects moving forward. Not that we've committed 100% and obligated ourselves to them, but we've asked. And so when they come up, we don't want to say, no, we can't do it this year because we don't know when we'll get the chance again. So that's one thing we definitely want to look at. And I know we talked about putting money aside from the airport to start building up that reserve fund. This is one of your hardest departments when it comes to the money side. But I definitely don't want to overlook it. And if it means that we need to get support from another department or fund, then that's what we need to have that conversation on. But when you get the proposed, it's going to include these expenses. Fuel coming in right now is actually doing well. I'm waiting to get some more information to close out June. That gives us 9 months to predict what would be, and then kind of get an idea of where we're at the beginning of July to see if the fuel cells are continuing. I know the big thing we mention a lot is that, you know, prices for fuel are over $7 a gallon. They are high, but people are paying it. We are very lucky that we have DPS and customs because they buy our fuel and they don't buy it, you know, a couple gallons at a time. They buy it in large shipments. So hopefully that will continue. We want to encourage those agencies to stay here and to keep providing us that resource. This one will be your hardest one. This is your easiest one. The hot fund, and I know Chris had to step away, but so for the hot fund, the big expenses are really controlled by the state of Texas. So our visitor center, of course, it's the personnel, the maintenance, and then of course, advertising and mailings. I know Heather would like to move into some more remodeling. So this is something that we are considering putting in there. I do have it on the agenda for July 19th to just basically reaffirm the Director of Tourism's contract. It is allowed to be renewed. That's kind of a mutual agreement. So I did make Chris aware of that. It also allows for an increase. So I am requesting an increase in his contract. We hadn't increased it from last year to this year. I think he does such a wonderful job and the funds are there. We need to do it. So for the events, the HOT committee will be meeting. Currently, based on all of the applications, there's close to about 500,000 in requests. Things that we have to ensure and keep track of on the state is the different departments in which we can spend it or areas. We are, once again, 51% of the revenue is required by state law for advertising. So we, right off the bat, we know if we're gonna budget 700,000, right off the bat, 51% is gonna go to advertising. We can also, arts, historical restoration, sporting events, transportation, and signage. These are all regulated by state law. So it's not something we can take the money and go throw it to use it for something else. I know Heather said, can we use it to pave roads at one point? Unfortunately, no. It has to be used specifically by the state guidelines for these specific areas. So it's one of the easiest because they have done such a wonderful job with maintaining not only within their budget, but they have built up a fund balance. So there is extra money. The fund balance can be used to budget, to balance the budget, but there has to be some guidelines and understanding with it. I know that if any time the committee for HOD or the council's like, you know, we really want to do this, you know, we have that availability, but we don't want to overdo it and we don't want to utilize all of that reserve that's been built up. We've had a few good years that have allowed for this. We had the oil when ETP was coming through, got a huge increase. Last year during budget discussions, they'd also brought in a lot of money. So the funds are available. We are excited. I know the HOD committee will meeting to discuss the different activities or events that are asking for funding, and we'll go from there. So the gas utility, this one, of course, it's personnel, the actual purchase of the gas. We do have a contract with WTG. They do have a mandated line replacement, the steel to poly that they are required to complete for both Alpine and Fort Davis. They do have a meter replacement program that they manage annually. There are railroad commission fees tied to this department. Travel and training, this upcoming year, we will be hit with the required every 3-year training. This is typically offered by GASTI, which is a gas group that comes in. Typically, they'll come into Marfa area. We are required to have every employee certified on everything from customer service to the different levels of safety to how to answer a phone call. So it is required and it's very beneficial to our city. And then we have 2 employees. We are once again very lucky within our area that have their welding certifications. So they weld on hot lines. They don't turn the gas off. They work through it. So those are things that we do keep on top of and make sure that they're certified. They have the training, not only to protect themselves, but to protect our residents. They also are required as part of the program that we're with DEMP, and they call it PAP. I don't know what the acronym stands for at the moment, but public education. So you hear it on the radio, you see the little ads in the paper. They also attend some of the community events with, you know, call 811, call before you dig, getting that information. How do you know if you have a gas leak? How do you know what gas smells like? How do you know gas markers? You'll see all of that over the year. You may be ignoring it because I don't need to, but it's important that we provide that information to our public, understanding where gas is located, understanding who to contact. So it's a big public education. Their uniforms are slightly more expensive because they are FR required. They have to be fire retardant. We can't just put them in a cotton shirt. Of course, they have their equipment and vehicle maintenance. Gas is a little bit different because the utility billing isn't a separate department. It's actually part of the whole budget. So the big expense from the customer service side is the mailing. It's the postage and the envelopes and everything to get the bills out every month. Other big one is the safety equipment. The focus on, of course, ensuring. You'll see them actually close off sections of the street. They don't just kind of close off a little work area. They close off the block. You are dealing with natural gas. So it is more of a safety for them. And then the big expense that we're looking at for this upcoming year is the rectifier. This is the one that is off of the golf course. Like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at about $95,000. The gas is a unique fund. They work within their means. They built up a net position. The gas is the only one that we have utilized for transfers. They've assisted numerous other departments and funds because they have that availability. They have no debt tied to them. So it's a little bit easier. I don't want to call them the cash cow because they really aren't, but it's easier to pull money if we need it. I wanted to bring this up because this is an expense. I do want to give a kudos not only to the current, the past councils with all of the hard work with the debt. As mentioned prior, the city had a great, every 3 to 5 years, let's just pull out a couple $1 million. That has stopped. And as Rod pointed out, without debt, we don't have the ability to ask for more debt at some point. So you'll notice that these are our current debts. The water and wastewater system series 2003 was paid off at the end of 21. I think that's important to know. What was left in that account was moved to utilize for the Holiday Inn lift station for the repairs for the constant issues we have out there. The 2005 will be paid off in 2036. This is a no interest loan at $138,000 that comes out every year from the water department, specifically tied to the water. The CO11 is a combined debt that's combined with the general fund and with the water department. You'll notice that the payment coming up, it will be paid off in 2031. The payment of $65,000 is the principal, interest of $27,389.25. When we list it as encumbered, because when we do our tax statements and we do our truth in taxation, this is money that's not encumbered through INS. So we call it out separately because it's not coming from what a citizen pays for property taxes. So $40,651 would come out of the water department. And then INS, which is what ties to our property tax, would be $51,731.98. The Geo Refunding Bond, this was one where they took multiple debts, rolled them into one, added a little bit more to it, will be paid off in 2024. That is not this upcoming fiscal year, but the following. So that's exciting. Our principal payment is $155, interest is $8,463. The unencumbered would be the water department's portion, $65,385. The interest in sinking, which is what we collect for property tax, is $98,078. Our 2012 was paid off in March of this year. That was tied to our wastewater plant. Our wastewater department, they now no longer have debt. The pumper truck, this was a unique setup. This was it's debt, but they leased it. The city made monthly payments that weren't collected through our INS. It was actually budgeted every year from our general fund. So this is one of those, you didn't have a choice, you had to pay it. It is now paid off. So we don't have that expense moving forward. So when you look at how much we owe in debt for this upcoming year, we're going to pay around $394,000 for the city as a whole. $149,817 will come from INS. That's what we collect from our taxes. When we look at the tax rate, the first thing we have to do is we have to determine our INS. We don't determine our MNO, otherwise we put it all towards it. We can figure what we need to collect from INS. We don't collect more. So when you look at the INS rate, it typically will fluctuate from year to year depending on what we have to collect. It has been lower because we're having to collect less and less. The water, of course, comes out of their operating. Most of theirs is a revenue tied to it, so they need to bring in money to pay their portion of the debt. So those are important things to know. Once we set our INS rate, of course, then that's what we know what we have for it. And that's actually my whole presentation. I wanted to run through all of the expenses so that not only council, I've been providing those detailed lists, but getting an understanding of we can make cuts. That's not an issue. We can, but it's also understanding we don't have as much room to make cuts unless you cut personnel. Those are your big expenses. Every department has made a great stride with cutting. Like I said, we're not doing the leased vehicles. We're going to utilize what we have because it's easy to add. It's really hard to take away. So we want to go into this year with understanding that we may have to add. We don't want to, but we may have to. But we're also going to cover the basics and the priorities for each of the departments. They're just not getting everything. This is where the CIP complements the budget. It's not required to be budgeted in unless we want to absolutely do something. This is one of those, if money comes down the pipeline or we were able to get a grant, the money's there so that, hey, this was in our CIP, we found the money, let's go ahead and move forward.
So do we have a balanced budget at the end of this?
I'm hoping so, yes. I've been working on the numbers for the past couple weeks, conversations with departments. I know poor Daryl, I called him like at 8 last night. Making adjustments, trying to find the little wiggle rooms.
Are we taking out of the reserve again? Quite a bit.
I'm trying not to. I currently have it at 0. The reserve, so this year, airport, we can pull from the reserve because that money was put aside for capital improvements. We just cut a check for 95,000 for the construction. Part of that should be covered that. The capital improvements for the street department. The money that was put aside was for the contract that Jarrett's still working on. So moving that money would reduce the reserves, but it's paying for, and that's where that balance came out of. It's moving the money from what it was designated for. The fund balance is slightly separate. We're trying not to utilize it, but every department hasn't fully utilized their budgets. So at the July 19th meeting, you'll have actually more information than you probably want. That will go over not only where we're currently at, what our projected years ends are, but also do we need to move it? Last year, we didn't move reserves. We didn't move anything into the general fund, to the airport, to any of that. We tried to maintain within our operating. So that's where we kind of went over and under on our fund balances, because we didn't take the revenue that was available into our operating. So the idea is, yes, not to utilize reserves, not to utilize fund balance, but to also understand if it comes to that, do we want to put a level to it?
Money.
So Rick Stevens, Ward 5, thanks for the rundown now, Megan. So last week, we had the discussion, the total income for the city this year for the budget is $13.7 million, 13.7, but the spend is 15.9. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there was money taken out of reserve to be able to cover what was expected to be spent.
If needed.
Yes, if needed. Will you next week have the forecast for the end of year expected expenditures?
Yes.
And will you also have the 3-year looking forward forecast next week?
No, not for the July 19th.
Okay, and when will that be available?
The first meeting of August.
The first meeting of August, because the reason I asked the question, if we have $13.7 million of income and we have a plan to spend 15.9, that's $2.5 million, as we discussed last week. You expected $1 million left in reserve. You expected another $700,000 for the CARES Act, so that's $1.7 million. That other $700,000 hasn't come in. And if you had a budget of $15.9 million, you'd be short about $500,000 from what the income would be, unless there's an increase in property taxes, unless there's an increase in water rates, unless there's an increase in sewer rates, bottom line, unless there's an increase for all the citizens to pay in other areas. On top of that, there is a $350,000 increase for employee wages. So that's 3% COLA plus 2% on top of that. Because as you stated earlier, about half the city budget is $7.3 million if you use a round number of $80,000 per head. So it's not clear to me how all these numbers balance out, because if you're showing up $2.2 million short for this year, you've got to be able to increase the money and still have a reserve, because again, the city council finance policy says, or budget policy says that you would have 6 months of reserve, which is $3 million for the general fund. So I presume all that's going to be baked into what we're going to see next week, because it's just not clear to me how those numbers add up based upon what you presented last week and what you're presenting today.
No, we'll have a discussion, yes.
I look forward to that. And when will that be available for all us to look at? Will it be available on Tuesday, the 19th, or before then?
So the draft budget will be in the packet, so you should have it Monday. That's
We'll
what we
have it
posted on the website.
Very good. Thanks very much. My concern is when I look at inflation rates and everything else, I think we as a city are not a budget as usual. I think we've got significant issues ahead, particularly when you're looking at inflation as reported today of 9.1%, which is certainly going to impact employees in a big way, and a real issue about being able to get the work done. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the budget, because I don't think you can get there.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, come on up, please.
My name is Steve Softchi. I live in Ward 5 out at Alpine Country Club Estates. And of course, because of that, I'm here to revisit something that's been visited many times before. And so this should bore everyone completely. That would be the road. That we recently had 1/8 of a mile repaved, which is about by Jarrett. And I believe that cost the city $99,000, $1,000. And we were very, very pleased to get it. What hasn't been addressed is if you add up the remainder of the road in Alpine Country Club Estate, that still has incredibly significant potholes to the point where you have to drive off the road. You have to drive on the wrong side of the road, and you're weaving back and forth just to try to avoid the potholes. And you're not going to, even at that, you're still going to be hitting potholes. We have replaced 6 tires in the last 2 years. Right now, I have a car that needs new shocks. There have been individuals that can tell you worse stories than what I'm telling you as to the damage that has occurred to their automobiles or SUVs or whatever they're driving. It's time for all of us to buy Jeeps. I'm totally convinced. If I were going to remain out there, which I have no intention of doing, I'm in the process of doing what I can to find my way out. And so as others, I'm sure, are planning that as well. But the point is, so I had an email exchange, a texting exchange with Catherine today, and I'm always so appreciative that she will listen to my complaints, as will Megan. Megan's really, really sweet to do that, and so good to get back with me, and so are you, as is Jerry Johnson. So good to do that, and I appreciate that very much. But so during our texting exchange, you mentioned, well, Orange Street is really horrible, as well as Alpine Country Club Estate. So of course I drive out to Orange Street. Well, there's a short block, not a long block, but a short block that's really bad, and there's no question. But it's not big, huge, deep potholes. It's just surface. Okay, so I don't consider that something that is incredibly significant, that has to be dealt with ASAP, compared to potholes that will destroy your tires and will destroy your alignments and will destroy your shocks, and that you're having to drive on the wrong side of the road with the possibility, and you're so busy watching for all of this while trying to avoid those potholes, that at some point I'm really afraid, and I've mentioned this several times to many of you, that there's going to be a horrible accident. And of course, I wouldn't wish that at all, but I'm just think it's an inevitability if something is not done. And I realize paving roads is incredibly expensive. I do understand that, and I do understand the constraints you guys have trying to run the city. It is very difficult. and there's not just money overflowing. There isn't. And I understand you would love to get rid of Alpine Country Club Estates. And of course, we would love to be part of the county. County doesn't want us. County would build us a beautiful road. There's no question. We'd love to be part of the county. They don't want us, you don't want us. Where does that put us? It puts us in the right between two hard rocks, and we're going nowhere real fast. And it's just getting uglier and uglier. And parts of the road that had been redone a couple of years ago are now starting to deteriorate. So that's just only going to get worse on the parts that even have been done. The new 1/8 of a mile, that one should be good for a while. It looks really good. That's 1/8 of a mile. Okay, from the end of that 8 to my home is another 1.5 miles, 1.5. So they just did 1/8 of a mile. There's still 1.5 miles to get to my house, avoiding potholes. In addition to that, that doesn't even include the roads off of that. If you include Mingo, if you include whatever they're calling it today, Cabell, or that one road has, I think, 3 different names depending on which house you're at. It's crazy. But nonetheless, if you include those roads as well, we're looking at 2.5 miles of really, really bad road. And they fixed 1/8, or you guys did that. And we appreciate it very much. And I do remember the time that they came out and they put dirt in those potholes. And at first I thought, this is a joke. Somebody's trying to be funny. And it was kind of humorous at the time. But then I started talking to neighbors and they were going, no, we're so glad to get the dirt. You know, this has really helped. This has helped so much. So if y'all could come back every week and throw dirt into those potholes, we would be so appreciative. And our automobiles would be so appreciative to get that. Would be great. Now, I do know that the pothole filling machine, whatever that is, that can fill those over, is out, down for the count. Last I heard, last meeting I was at, that was like, it wasn't working. Is that still the case?
They're working on repairing it. It's getting the
Okay,
parts.
well, if they could get it fixed tomorrow, we would love that. We would be very happy about that. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, that, you know, we have a real serious issue out there, and it is very dangerous. And I've mentioned that many times. And it cannot be mentioned enough, because somebody's going to get hurt.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Very
Steve.
much. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Afternoon, Tom Strong, Ward 1. City budget's not much different than your own budget at home, right? You got money going out, you got money coming in. There's not always enough money coming in. So what do you do about that? You find more money. What does this community in this county have a lot of that can be used to generate some financial resource? And that's the sun. Does the city have, and this is just an idea, kick around, think about it. Does the city have any property that can be utilized and leased to one of the energy companies for solar field? It's going to generate revenue, right? Through a lease. We're going to get a kickback and our electric rates are going to go down. And right now, Texas is in trouble with electric rates. I mean, ERCOT on the rest of the state, they're telling people don't run your AC until 9 o'clock tonight. Right? The revenue it's going to generate for the people coming out here to put that in, the jobs it's going to generate, more revenue. Let's look at what our community and our county has to support our community and our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, anyone else? Anything else? Okay, well, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you for attending and for your ideas. Thank you.
Because the mayor never.
That's the reason why. That is true.
Okay.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did.